Hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ya ya hey ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya 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 hey ha yo hey yo hey yo Fort Beck Community College Ukiepino yo yo me too gashi dagush kashka yogi piano yo yo wata pevi hagik tabi ichachia ya bino hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ya hey ha yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ya yo hey ha yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ha hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ha yo hey yo hey yo Fort Beck Community College Ukiepino yo yo me too gashi dagush kashka yogi piano yo yo wata pevi hagik tabi ichachia ya bino hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ya ha yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ya yo hey ya ha yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ha hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ha ya
Ho mitakiapi, daya yahipido. I want to welcome everybody to our humble Buffalo Chasers podcast in a good way. I want to thank Mr. Tommy Christian and Mr. Sweeney Hawk Winchie for joining us today. It is November 17th, 2022. We're coming at you from Fort Peck Community College. And today we have a little different format. We have we reached out to a distinguished individual and asked him to join us here today. So we have Mr. Sweeney Hawk Winchie, Dr. Sweeney in the house. And so he's a tribal member of Fort Peck Assiniboine Sioux tribes. He brings a wealth of information to the table for our discussion on Indian education and philosophy and all that good stuff. And so typically we try to go live on our Facebook feed or whatever. There's some technical issues with Zoom right now, but we'll record this anyway in a good way. And then I always try to have an elder that's on the call with us say some good words and a prayer. And so next, Tommy's in the house. And so I want to ask him if you would say maybe a few good words for us next, if you could.
How hetutilo dai chanu tuska upila chicha. Mitugashi tukashila na wakantanka tadewia doba unchi makana makaina. Naku mitake wanagi makfea kaya ge hocho kakta hiopo. Nichope unshia keni take pinaha wana kiksi apo mitake pia unchi makao mani hoyaza pi na chante yoksi jo mani owi chake apo ushi wichalapo. Tukashila na wakantanka Dixie apo mitake pi manuk chalapi wichak chalapi na wakain chapi hukchilapi unchin chalapi kuskapi we kuskapi we choose ani unkupi chanku ashte unkupi ambet kile upi la tankan tukashila wakanta gambetu ashte mayaku na ushia ke mitake pi wayawa oyate ki wichasha bile miapile Ushiake Okia Chavo. Atu Kashila Nawakanaka Chewichasha Mielo. Gixiapo Midaki Epinaha. Oyate Oyasi Chakun Luta Aga Omani Owichakiapo Ushu Chalapo. Gixiapo Midaki Epia Gichita Oyate Gizuya Ekta. Wichasha Bilena Wiapile Chakua Steon Kupi. How Midaki Oasi.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah. Next, beautiful
Oh.
prayer again.
Mm.
So with that, maybe we'll just kind of dive in. We try not to be too formal around here because we don't want to be in some way. We want to be create that good atmosphere on our little pod here. And how long we've been going? This is like number 81, I believe.
yeah.
About almost 2 years now, a little over 2 years we've been going strong, trying to meet the Student Success Challenge through this awesome virtual experience. And so feel free to chime in at any time. Actually, Tommy, but I did just out of respect for our guests, and I had a few canned questions that I wanted to ask him. And so I'll let you introduce yourself, my brother, Mr. Hawk Winchief. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, then we'll kind of take things from there. Pirama.
Hakuna Bihikna Daguyabi. Tazumi Tawa Tatanga Togahe. Hikna Sweeney Wincy, Sweeney Wasti Dubi Magyar. Wasti Nagabi. Man, it's good to see both of you. Thank you for this invitation. I was just telling Liza before we got on, I get more nervous presenting to the community or home than I do out there, right?
Yeah.
I present at Cornell or Michigan or any place out there, and I don't get as nervous as I do when I'm with you, because they're not as good at teasing as you. So I really gotta mind my P's and Q's here.
Yeah.
But I really do appreciate the cultural component that you guys pulled into this. You're encouraging. You guys use the language so much. Just as a warm up, I was been watching podcasts since yesterday afternoon of you guys, and I got some questions for both of you now.
Oh.
I'll wait. Well, one of the things I wanted to do is there's this thing called a land acknowledgement that we hear a lot about. I'm sure you've both heard them. You hear people talk about land acknowledgements, and I had somebody once share with me that I should create a relationship with my land acknowledgement, as opposed to just say the canned thing. Here at Montana State, we're on the lands of so and so. Right? I want to recognize it in a little bit, maybe a different way. My land acknowledgement is I want to recognize the reality that I'm speaking to you from a land grant institution. In 1862, as part of my manifest destiny, the same, I think it was within 3 months, there was the Intercontinental Railroad Act, the Morrill Act, the Land Grant Morrill Act that established land grant universities, and what was the other one? The Dawes Allotment Act. All happened at the same time, all a part of manifest destiny. And to that I say, if our institutions, I'm not just here to criticize, but I do have to recognize that I'm sitting at a university that is here due to the displacement of Indian people.
Yeah.
So I walk around conflicted all the time because of that. But I don't want to just criticize. I want to invite my own institutions and other land grant institutions to recognize and realize that if they can reimagine their curriculum from 1893 or whenever they started until today, where back then it was about westward expansion, it was about infrastructure, it was about land as a resource, which is problematic. And if they can change that, where we now have American Indian Hall, we've got Native American studies, we're studying psychology and education and all these other things, we can reimagine our relationship as an institution with the indigenous communities, right? So I don't want to just be all critical, but at the same time, I want to recognize that conflict that I'm working within. Also, I want to recognize both of you and your place of leadership for our community. I'm humbled to be asked to see the lineup of rock stars that you hosted on this show and the conversations that you have. You know, Wamni Sage, Uncle Tommy, we got Earl Bullhead, Johnny Lee Bear Cub, Kelsey Helgeson, Jeremy Redigo. These are all people that I know and I respect. And so I really want to share with you that this is an honor for me to be asked to join you today. And then lastly, I just want to say you use the term doctor, and I just want to be clear, I'm no medical doctor. If you break your ankle, then I can write a grant or something, you know,
Yeah.
be able to fix that ankle. Yeah, I want to thank you for the invitation. You know, I guess a little bit about, I don't know, my background. One of the sort of prompts that Elijah sent me is, you know, why did you choose your educational path, and what motivated you to complete your degrees? And it stems way back. I grew up primarily off reservation in Southwest Wyoming, and spent some summers, not all summers, but some summers up on Joe Day's Thunderbird Ranch. And so I didn't get to go into town very often. I was mostly walking around Joe Day's land over there with a 22. But came back, and Red Bottom Celebration is one of my earliest memories. The beautiful things that we have at home. But when I was growing up, I remember distinctly the 4th grade curriculum in Evanston, Wyoming. They were teaching us history, Wyoming history. They were talking about the Indians, and the way that they taught about Indians was absolutely opposite of what I learned from my grandparents. And I didn't have the language at the time, right, to voice my frustration, because I knew education was important. All 4 of my grandparents have their bachelor's degrees. Both my parents have their bachelor's degrees. Education was something that my family valued. You know, it's a way to do well for your family. And when that happened, when that teacher said those things about us, I got angry, started acting out in class. Parents were frustrated. They had to call the school psychologist. I had to go into meetings and all kinds of trouble. And I from that day forward, I didn't trust any of my teachers because of what that one teacher said. You know, in 4th grade, I thought all of a sudden, you know, how do I know if this person's not telling me the truth about something that I do know about? How do I know they're telling me the truth about what I don't know about? Yeah. And I held on to that, still holding on to it. And so one of the things that happened was I came home and I showed my dad my report card. And he knew I was having trouble in school, and he got really mad. But one thing that I did have was sports. I played football, I wrestled, that's who I identified myself as. And I knew just enough to play the game, jump through the hoops, get better than a 2.0, and then you can compete, you can play your sport, you can do your thing. And that's how it worked for me all the way through high school, all the way through college, all the way until about halfway through my master's degree. And in my master's degree, I did my undergraduate work. I graduated with my bachelor's from Central Oklahoma, University of Central Oklahoma. I wrestled down there. The first time I ever heard Indians say y'all. So every time I heard an Indian with an accent, they sounded like they were from Canada, eh? Where every statement sounds like a question. Yeah. And so when I heard Indians say y'all, man, it threw me for a loop. Anyway, I graduated there and took a little time off, and then I had a ex-wrestling coach motivate me to get back in, finish up. When I was doing my master's degree at the University of Montana, we had to do a book review, and I looked for books on counseling and Native Americans, and I found one. It was a little bit thin, and I read it, and I can't remember the title of it, but I remember it was the best piece of misappropriation of Indian culture I'd ever seen in my life. It was some nonprofit organization called themselves the Deer Tribe Métis Clan something somewhere, right? It was wasn't even real Indians that were writing this book, and they were talking about all these Indian concepts, and so I really got mad. And so in my paper I said I don't care if they kick me out. I'm going to tell them what I think about this. They asked me to review this and how it works and how it doesn't work. And so I ripped I just ripped it apart, submitted my paper. Sure enough, one of my professors invited me in before class, the next class. Said, "Hey, we want to talk to you before class." Okay. Figuring I said, I might as well just start packing up my stuff. I'm gonna get kicked out of here.
Yeah.
Here, the professor, she said, "Hey, we want you to think about maybe applying for our doc program." And I said, "Wait, whoa, what? Why?" Like, and she said, "Well, we really appreciated your book review. We really hadn't thought about this book that way." And then the light bulb came on, right? In graduate education, up in your undergrad, yes, you're a consumer of knowledge and information. Well, we always should be, I suppose. But in the system, you get into your master's degree and you get super specific. Every field has its own language, its own knowledge, its own vernacular. And then all of a sudden, when you use what you know and can substantiate what you know to either support or disprove somebody else's way of thinking, that adds to what the academy sees as the truth, right? So that surprised me, and so I finished my counseling degree there, and then I went to work at I was working at the time at Swan Valley Youth Academy. I remember next year, and Earl Bullhead, a whole bunch of folks came and saw us, and there was this facility, and it was a residential facility for incarcerated youth, adjudicated youth. And the one thing that bugged me was a couple of things. Number one, 80% of the students or the trainees, cadets in that camp were Indian. So I could see there's a crazy overrepresentation of Indians in the system, which was problematic. And then the way that they dealt with them was problematic, right? That was back in the 90s or early 2000s when they were shaving kids' heads and yelling at them and stuff. And I thought, man, if you're trying to help these kids get things straight, it feels like we might be going about this the wrong way. And so decided to get out of that. And I applied for a position at Montana while I was there, and at the University of Montana. And when you work in higher education, everybody you work with has something going right, as opposed to the adjudication, right? Everybody, something is going wrong, not much going right. So that's how I ended up doing that. And then I worked at the American Indian Graduate Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico for a while, and had a mentor there named Norbert Hill, the Oneida guy. The Charlie Hill, the famous comedian, it's his brother. And he asked me one day, he says, "I need you to figure out this thing, graduate school for Indians," he said. And I've been working on that ever since. That was back in 2005 or something. So I applied and didn't get accepted at some institutions. And then finally I applied at the University of Utah and got accepted into education, leadership, and policy. And I tried my dissertation was on trying to figure out how to implement the Montana Indian Fee Waiver in Utah. But to my way of thinking, isn't that a treaty obligation? Public education as a public institution, K-20, that should be. And for specific purposes, I had Dr. Jim Stanley, previous president of Fort Peck Community College, on my committee. And the reason that I had him on my committee was because if somebody back home said, "No, you can't do that, you shouldn't be doing that," I could say, "Well, Jim said it was okay." So but it was more about community accountability too. Who am I to do this work without some community oversight? And so now, after I finished up there, I took this position at Montana State University. I'm associate professor, a tenured professor in adult and higher education. I teach critical race theory. I teach indigenous methodologies and research. I teach law and policy in higher education. And I recognize that teaching law and policy kind of helped me out, because I learned that Indian Education for All is a K-20 initiative. Doesn't end at 12. And if it's a constitutional mandate. If you're not teaching about Indians, regardless of class, could be engineering, computer science, could be psychology, whatever. If you're not teaching from the most local indigenous perspective, then you're breaking the law.
Yeah.
And so I use that in my classes to help me stay connected, at least conceptually, to where I'm from. And so I don't know with that. I mean, is there any like that's sort of how I got to where I'm at. The page didn't turn for me until I tell you what happened. It was right after my what they call comprehensive exam. Right, that's where they decide whether or not they're going to kick you out of a doc program or not. And I took my comprehensive exams, and I learned all those years to jump through the hoops really well. But then I had this huge crisis of relevance happen. You know, how does this? What's going on here for Native people? Why am I not reading about us? Why am I not in some way trying to contribute to my community and well-being? And so I took a month and I just read Indigenous scholars just to see how they navigate, negotiate their own Indigenous identity, no matter where they're from, in this Western academic paradigm, right? In this educational system. And it's all over the place. Some don't do it at all. They're Indian, but they just, you know, they walk the walk. And then you've got some that sort of maybe romanticize their own Indigenous identity and scholarship. And you've got some that do it really well. You could tell they're community centered. You know, you could tell where their heart's at and their spoke on the wheel of being able to move forward as a community. And so it really helped me think. And the one that made the change for me was a Hawaiian scholar named Manulani Aluli Myers. And I'll talk a little bit more about her work if you want to hear about it. But she had these words on this paper, just jumped off that paper and came at me. She said, how you move to the space that you're in tells us a lot about you. And that resonated, right? She said it in an abstract way. So you could tell, like, he was the way that I read it, he was voicing what our relatives are saying on the other side, right? I thought to myself, can I just jump through these hoops? Do they want to see me be a part of this assimilation machine? Like, or do they want me to say to do this and learn from it and use it for community, right? And so that kept coming up for me again and again and again. Another time we were presenting, and this old man from Tonga, it was right after I defended my dissertation. We were in Hawaii with all these like Tongan, Samoan, Hawaiian, Maori scholars in the room, all Pacific Islander scholars, Indigenous scholars. And I was busting out my $20 words, boy. Epistemology that, axiology this, ontology this. And me and my co-presenter, a guy named Victor Narsamulu, we were just mentally high-fiving each other in the room because we knew we were knocking it out of the park. And this man stands up, big fella, big salt and pepper, bushy hair, blue shirt with hibiscus flowers on it. He looks at us and he points at us and he says, theory, blah, 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 he says. He says, I want to know what you're doing to support your community right now. And I never, ever want to be caught flat-footed like that again.
Yeah.
Right. And so a little bit about my educational process. So now I'm in a position to where they literally asked me when I took this position, hey, we know you can teach this and this, but what do you want to teach? Without even thinking about it, right? I said, critical race theory, not knowing it was going to become the controversial thing that it has.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, wrote it down. There's like Indigenous methodologies and research. Okay, yeah, let's start with those two. All right, right on. So I had to go through the process to get those as standard classes in our program, in our department, and since then they still are my favorite courses to teach. So I don't know. I mean, we have a couple of programs. I'm what they call a PI or primary investigator on Sloan Indigenous Graduate Partnership. I don't know if either of you, maybe both of you know Dion Zawani. He was one of our SIGP students, did some really, really good work there. We've got Caleb Williams here. He's doing good work. We developed a training program for STEM faculty to mentor Native students. I do research that confronts sort of the extractive nature of Wasiji research. I think about things like, why are we only hearing, half of the story? Why are we only hearing Wasiji perspectives and not the indigenous perspectives, right? They always talk about the conflict between people and never about the relationship. And so it's really nice to get into the sort of away from that discourse of conflict and moving into that discourse of relationship.
Yeah.
And then recently, I mean, I think there's some work to be done in proving the genius. And this is more on the science, technology, engineering side, but we've got a couple of projects. I literally went, have talked to a couple of folks, talked to Jojo and Uncle Ronnie and Mason Runs Through, and asked them if it was okay if we did this. And now we're studying the computational fluid dynamics of a teepee, right? So it's been really fun to introduce this. I took out my teepee and there was 8 engineering professors, PhDs in engineering. I said, okay, here's the rule. Rule number 1, put your phones away. Don't YouTube nothing. Don't be Googling it. If you were going to put one of these up for real, we wouldn't even have the capacity to do that. So the rule number 2, don't cut anything. Put your hatchets away and your knives. And the last rule was, you've got 1 hour to put this up. So I cut them loose. And when we do this next time, if you guys want to come down, it's awesome. We can sit in lawn chairs and watch and see how they do it, right? Their engineering minds. And then we took it down. And I got before and after pictures I should have had prepared, right? Man, that cover was about 3 feet off the ground. Great big smoke cloud. Their tripod, there was 8 of them, so it was a 7-pole tripod. It was really pretty fun. And then we took it down and talked about it a little bit. There's some team working stuff going on. And then there was Stacy Summers' son, Kinsey Skillen. He's an engineer down at Texas A&M. He was visiting that week. And I said, hey, you ever set one up? And then he said, yeah. He said, I've helped. He said, I was like, you want to go Dakota or Nakota? And he said, well, I'm Dakota. I said, so let's go east. So let's do the setup, Nakota. I was like, all right, sure, let's do it. So, man, 20 minutes. So I just wish that somebody from home would have been there to see it. That's as good as I've ever done. And the engineers, they saw that and they looked at it and they talked and then I asked them, I was like, okay, put on your engineering hat. What do you see? And one guy was just like, this is a pretty good example of how to teach computational fluid dynamics. So that's one of the things that we're working on this side too. We've got a research experience for teachers. We bring up 11 rural and reservation teachers to stay with us for 6 weeks in the summer. They have an orientation week, and then they do research, and they research specifically on Indian education for all and energy for elementary students, right? So developing lesson plans and learning how to develop relationships and get feedback on their lesson plans that are more relevant to communities so that their students have pedagogical or learning and teaching access to some of this information. Yeah, I guess I don't know. That's some of the stuff I got going on now.
Okay, right on. I got one question for you. Next, were you going to say something?
Yeah, Toshka, one of the things in your research, just because you're getting interested in that area and start opening up these people's minds to help them understand the importance of how our people survived in such harsh climate or the changing thereof and all that good stuff, how they travel so well. And once you realize, I think a key would be do some research on the stories of origin. And then as you apply them to a contemporary time, see how effective they've been throughout life, why these stories were told and how they did and who did it and what was their involvement and what was their purpose there, these stories of origin come back hundreds of, from the beginning of time they come. and they've always been carried on. But you got to get the original stories. You can't get some guy out there bullshitting his way through. Don't get me, because I don't know him. But
I was just gonna ask you. No,
but find somebody that really knows the true stories of origin. That would be another good concept to approach in the way you research that, and you got those folks going. And I'm glad to hear that you're really instituting this CRT. That's one of our things that we're doing here through the process of trying to help our young people understand the importance of critical thinking, And then it's become so highly political. It was on the ballot in South Dakota to deny critical race theory in schools and education. And again, of course, to them, maybe to our non-Indian relatives, maybe it's against their wishes, but on the res, that's a way of life for us, That's how we continue on, is through these stories. We dance to them, we make songs about them, we listen to stories about our past, our history, so we don't repeat them again, So, but that's a good thing you're doing, Hawk. I'm really glad. I'm really thankful I have an opportunity to kind of sit down with you. I talked to you about something before, and I forgot what it is. Remember, I asked you to research something or look into something way back when we were at the lodge, and I forgot what I asked you to think about. But anyway. But it sounds like you're headed in the right direction, and you're collecting all this good resource. The main thing is to be able to identify those individuals that are legitimate, if you will, for lack of a better word, and then making sure that the information you research and that you attain is definitely something that has some foundation and some substance to it. But it sounds good. I'm glad. Oh man, I'm glad I'm listening. Go ahead, Tushka. Elijah. I just wanted to share that with Hawk.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah. There was just a lot of, I was reflecting when you're, Tanshi, when you're talking about your, defending your dissertation and Kona, Hawk, he flew me down there too. Back then I didn't have much, really, man. But he paid for my flight. So I got to visit with Shanley down there. Was in the room when they deliberated, came back with the verdict, man, and everybody was for it in a good way. And I remember Shanley really had some good, healthy words, some constructive feedback, and it was good. I still remember that very vividly, and it had a big impact on me. And so I know that by bringing my older brother Hawk over here, you'd share some good things. And sometimes I think when I was listening to Nekshi Tommy over the past month or two talk about critical race theory, and it's become highly politicized and whatnot. And I think part of it, that the issue that I see is just a fundamental lack of understanding what critical theory even is. And so maybe if you could do us a favor, my brother Hawk, if you could maybe explain really at a rudimentary level what it is, because we have some viewers that have like zero background on what it even is. And maybe from your perspective, it'd be helpful if you kind of lay just like a basic foundation of what that is, if you could.
Yeah.
Just say historical truth.
Well, it's certainly part of it. It's I'm actually teaching that class this semester, and we have class tonight. So it's a good warm up for class for sure. But I have a room full of intellectual powerhouses, right? Are all graduate students. They're all really sharp. And I start the first class. The first thing that we do after we do introductions is I ask them, okay, what is critical race theory? And we have that discussion, and people start to wonder if they know what it is, right? They would start to think about where it came from and how it developed over time and how it's been changed. And so and I do that every beginning of every class, and it takes about 8 weeks, about halfway through the semester before we start to really put our thumb on it. This group of students was pretty quick. About 6 weeks in, they had it down pretty good. But there are a couple of
Toshka,
really
you should, after you ask them that, you should ask them, why do you think there's political opposition for critical race theory? Especially because it's based on truth. So that's your next question for them young people to think about. Why are they politicizing it and make it feel like they have to defend it? Such cognitive dissonance, see? I just keep going.
No, that's right. Like it's the definition is different depending on who's talking and sometimes what their political leanings are, right? And
Yeah.
so one of the things that I like to do with my students is really get a good foundational knowledge. What are the primary concepts or tenets of critical race theory, right?
Yeah.
So the first one would be, and this is the theory, right? This is the theory. I have my own critiques of the theory. There's some of it I really appreciate it. There's some of it that I think could use some tweaking. But the primary concept, that's the first one that they talk about is race as a social construct, right? So, and in a political sense, right, at one point in time, think about it, Italians, Irish, Jewish folks weren't white, right?
Nope.
And now they're considered white, right?
Yep.
And so, and so that's been socially reconstructed as it connects to power, influence, and financial capital, right? So the second one is racism is endemic to American life. We've all seen the on the Statue of Liberty. There's the plaque that says "Bring me your tired, your poor, your etc." At the same time as that thing's sitting in our and everybody takes that as a place of pride. We're building walls right on the southern border, right? Bring me your tired, your sick. Like, why don't they put that plaque on that wall, right? So American life is supposed to be the great social experiment of the melting pot. And critical race theory like pushes back on that a little bit. Another one is the concept of intersectionality, right? And intersectionality isn't just different intersections of one's identity. I think it's misconstrued. In critical race theory, when they talk about intersectionality, it's about intersecting places of oppression, right? If you have somebody that's oppressed by their place in gender identity isn't in the binary, right? We have somebody that's Winkte, for instance, but they're also American Indian, Alaska Native, or they're indigenous person or a person of color. But then on top of that, they're low socioeconomic status. On top of that, right, they're not Christian. On top of that, right, it's the different places. On top of that, they might be disabled. On top of that, they might be an elder, right, or be experiencing some ageism out there in society. These are all intersecting places of oppression. That's what intersectionality is, and how those intersections are comprehensive in the oppression of people. So another one is a commitment to racial justice, right? Another one is the centrality, and I love this one, the centrality of experiential knowledge, right? So experiential knowledge is a reality that reflects the lived experience as opposed to what the books tell us it is.
Yeah.
We all went to public school. We all learned things from a Euro perspective in English while we were in school, right? When we start thinking about experiential knowledge, that's where we get to a place of like, okay, wait a minute, one person's truth isn't another's truth, right? It's not big T truth. People have different truths, different experiences. It's interdisciplinary, so it originated in critical legal studies. In fact, critical race theory isn't taught. I have yet to see a primary K-12 curriculum, even undergrad curriculum that includes or focuses on critical race theory. It's because it's primarily taught in law schools and in graduate programs. So a couple of other sort of main ideas would be racism is systemic, normal, and pervasive. Right? It's something that's there. It's something you can't do anything about. It's a part of the American fabric.
And you see, Hawk, now this is where I'm coming from. That would stand true in the United States of America, but not necessarily within the exterior boundaries of any given reservation. See, if we want to be a sovereign nation and exercise our autonomy, we can establish that within our boundaries, eh? And in that's where I think it's really key and important for individuals like yourself and of course Toshka, Elijah, to get it together for the sake of, we talk about that abstract experientials that you're talking about. well, that experiential teaching, we call it abstract learning, compared to linear, which is reading, writing, arithmetic. And that experiential is the involvement of the hands-on about that, which our way is based on. Now, how can they contend that that's wrong because all they want to concern themselves is the linear, eh? And that don't apply to them, but they don't realize the sense of balance that it would provide even to non-Indian young people that are learning, understand the importance of critical thought, and then being able to go out there and coexist with some sense of cultural responsiveness as it relates to all these different cultures that they're involved in, eh? And so, one thing too, Hawk, what I think needs to be considered, guess who named it CRT? And so can we take that and refer to it in a different manner, but yet get the same outcome from what it is, how we apply it, our stories of origin, our stories of survival, eh? Instead of, see, they're sticking to that CRT because they can control that in a political arena, and then it just kind of takes everything and puts it all together without. That's why I mentioned within our exterior boundaries, we as sovereign nations allegedly can go out, and they refer to us as quasi-sovereign, eh? Which is an oxymoron. Actually, if you think about it, if you understand the definition of sovereignty, what the hell is an oxymoron, Grace? You can't be sovereign if it's you're quasi. But anyway, the point that I'm making is, see, those are the things these young people need to understand. The critical race theory can be re-identified as something else for the sake of its effectiveness or its ability to really have some sort of an effect on our young people coming into a college arena such as yours. Somebody that needs to step up and say, you call it critical race theory, I call it real life. That's reality. That's in our history. We talk about the old people share stories. Our warriors defended this, but they won't acknowledge that because how they make it political is, we don't want our children thinking they're trying to make these kids victims, eh? We don't want our children feeling oppressed because of what their ancestors did. Get over it. And that's classic, man. And so they politicize it to prevent that from happening. And so I think it'd be to our benefit within our arena, within our environment, within our boundaries, we could control that if our leadership understood the effects of that. Because I coined a phrase, where do you hide your Indian when you're trying to act white? And in your discussion, you talked about it just like that, eh? And so people get offended by that because I think I'm talking racism. No, what I'm saying is that's a reality. How many people had to follow the norm and they're Indian and had to hide their Indian just so they could get along and get a job or get an education or whatever, eh? We shouldn't have to do that. And that's what that thing you were talking about where land back, or what was it?
Land acknowledgement, yeah.
Land acknowledgement. And see, even in that, within the exterior boundaries, like for instance, the churches, if they're no longer being utilized, if they're no longer in a status of function, really that law you were talking about earlier, that's supposed to give that land back to the Indians, eh? And you see Christianity is going down the drain because nobody is afraid of it no more. Nobody is structured to do that anymore. They're becoming more and more spiritual, or no base of a moral or ethic basis to make their decisions on, because I think it's gone. That's why that's why they created the pandemic, is to fear so they can control the people. And look at an Indian country, we really didn't fear it. A lot of us didn't want to get immunized until they paid us. That's another story. But you see my point, Ak? You see what I'm saying? Our young people need to understand the importance of critical thought and realize that they can change that name of CRT and put it to something else, Indianized approach or something like that. Well, but that's my point.
So, yeah, no, I'll adjust that a little bit. I mean, even the concept of tribal sovereignty is couched in Western legalistic terminology and understanding, right? I mean, critical race theory, even decolonizing methodology, right?
Yeah.
When it's a reaction to, and it's not what some of our relatives are more attuned to, right? And that's the natural law. And those are the things that what I would call indigenous knowledge realization, even though it's in English, right? Or could be as simple as being Nakona or Dakota thought. Yeah. Without historicizing or romanticizing or exoticizing or whatever. So there's also, I guess there's a couple of these that there's a couple more, but one I want to approach that I think really really impacts people is this concept of interest convergence. Right, this is where rubber meets the road with critical race theory.
What's it called?
Right? So, interest convergence.
Instant convergence.
Interest.
Interest convergence.
Interest conversion. Okay, yeah. Now it makes sense.
Yeah.
I couldn't get it.
So my understanding of interest convergence, and this is a theory that was put forth by a guy named Derek Bell, the first tenured African-American law professor at Harvard, right? And had that double consciousness, had to walk through a Fiji world as an African-American man, right? And so the theory of interest convergence is sort of the classic, the classic in the literature, what people talk about in terms of interest convergence was the desegregation of schools, right? So the desegregation of schools actually happened, and they did research on this and found that didn't happen until after World War II. In the Cold War, the Axis powers had a propaganda movement that was critical of the United States because there were soldiers that were on the Axis side that were just like, these African Americans are dying in battle and they still don't have equal access to education. Right? All of a sudden, bang, you have desegregation of schools as a reaction to the propaganda. Right? So the basic idea of interest convergence, it isn't like when your interest converges with my interest and we're all good. In critical race theory, interest convergence is like change is only made when it benefits those already in power. Right.
Yep.
So my example is, and I mean, without too much detail, but do either of you know what the first state to give women the right to vote? Do you know what state that was?
No.
The first state was Wyoming. And everybody, so my first thought is like, Wyoming, huh? That's strange. Like, they don't seem like they're that progressive, right? Even today. But yet on their license plate, the equality state, right? Wyoming gave women the right to vote because they needed to double their population in order to become a state so that those that were in power could maintain power.
Makes sense.
Right. So, and there's a lot of examples, but the idea is that it's sometimes it's what looks good on the brochure, right? And everybody calls it social justice, but it's not.
Propaganda.
It was done there. It was there to maintain power for those already in power. All right.
Yeah.
I guess the other one would be it's anti-essentialist, right? And this developed over time. And anti-essentialist means like there is no one as three Native men sitting here. We haven't all had the same experience, right? We're not the same. Yes, we're related. We have shared things, but there's not one like monolithic experience that works for each and every racialized group, right? So it works away from stereotypes, generalizations, etc., even from within those communities. So I don't know, that's my quick overview, I guess. My thoughts on critical race. Well, go ahead.
No, that's good. That's perfect. You know, what we got to do is get together and just sit down for a couple of 3 days and just establish a basic, fundamental, rudimentary way for our young people to really pursue life based on critical thinking, based on their ability to understand the importance of what you need to demand from your leadership, how you can educate them to understand the importance of the people in the golden rule is currently ruling. No one's all golden ruling right now, but we can change that in our own Indian community. That's what I identified too with what you were saying, Hawk, is we can break it down and come from and our families got to start it. Our tribes got to start it, and our communities definitely got to start applying that. But if we keep it at a smaller level, and it's so classic within these exterior boundaries of any reservation, that's a small enough area in which we could totally be effective for our sake. And then hopefully they'll catch on and say, oh, it's benefiting them. So let's do that. And in the whole meantime, we'll deal with this learned behavior of alcoholism, drug abuse, the effects of historical trauma, all that. But again, we've got to start somewhere. But I think we should get together and establish that, man.
Yeah, man, that was good stuff right there. I really like hearing that. And for those of you that are listening, if this is the first time you've been exposed to the construct of crit, okay, and if you feel some smoke coming out of your ears and those dribbles are getting tired, that's a good thing, because I took this class one time, and they were talking about the neural pathways in your brain. You're forming new neural pathways, and it hurts, but you're learning something good, and that's what we want. We're trying to educate. Normally we try to go for about an hour, and I feel like we're just at the cusp of a good conversation. And when I was listening to my brother, my Kona Hawk, it sounds like there's an opportunity. I don't want to take advantage of his time, because he's like doing like these double doctor degrees, and like he's really going down deep into this rabbit hole of critical race theory that's really kind of like an unexplored phenomenon in a lot of ways. And so I think it would behoove us, Nekshi Tommy, if we visit more and we invite Mr. Dr. Hawk Moonshief back later on, but we don't want to take advantage of his time too much. But like, I think there's a good reciprocal relationship here that we can do in a virtual format that really enhances what we're trying to do through this Okonagiche, Okolagiche, all that good stuff. And we're going to keep driving this message home. Is there any parting comments from you gentlemen?
I just say, and again, Hawk, you're just like, we're working from a community perspective. We're a community college, and we're trying to help our people understand the importance of that community, which is based on family. And of course, it involves them as an individual, eh? And so it's kind of basically like you're kind of more nationalized like that, which would really benefit our young people of understanding to go beyond that fear and go out there and pursue your doctorate, pursue higher education at university level or something like that. But it's good to start at the community as well. And so stuff like that. So I think we need to get together as guys and establish something, an avenue of approach to dealing with some of these concerns that we have locally, just from a community level, that would really apply to us. Because Hawk, you've been there, done that, and you have a lot of good advice. So I'll head you to a Wopilai Chichapalo Toshka Dai Chanu. Oh, Wopilai.
Pinamaya. I guess parting thoughts would be like, this is a big conversation, right? I started with the idea that it takes a room full of graduate students like 6 or 8 weeks to be able to begin wrapping around their brain around the understanding of it. But the application is sometimes already happening at home.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess one of my best, I guess I'll leave you with this. This is a teaser for the next time. Right, so the fancy academic term is epistemological pluralism, right? That's a fancy way of saying multiple ways of knowing. Right. So my last conference presentation where we had a poster, the academic poster, me and Abdallah, pro buddy of mine, Jason Cummins, pulled together. Instead of a poster, we made a winter count.
Wow! Right on.
Right. And we set it up against all those academic posters. And what people don't know is each one of these concepts on here means something, but it's also got a story behind it, right?
Historically, yeah.
And so what we're doing is privileging orality and recognizing indigenous ways of knowing, and being able to. And the whole goal was to be able to take what we're doing and be able to share it with our families, right? How can we explain this to our grandparents, our uncles, our aunties, our nieces, our nephews, our own kids? Because it gets so theoretical in these spaces that we actually had to re-story these things and provide stories for this stuff, as opposed to like just reading it in a book and having to memorize it, but really make a human connection with it. So that's, if you want to rap about that, another podcast, another day, man. That's something I'd really like to share.
Ed should too. Heck yeah.
You know, Toshka, we got like Elijah and I talk, and we do a lot of stuff, and we got a basic fundamental thing that we're trying to address. This ideological paradigm shift is what we make reference to. Help people perceive us as differently than what they currently do, eh? And then based on that, based on our cultural value system, that should become an enhancement and an enrichment for the sake of the growth of our children, you know? And it's diverse and it's unique, and we apply those, but we're talking from a community perspective. And you can structure that and make it work so well for everybody because of your involvement, because your worldly understanding of these things in the political system, the educational system, the community system, the Big Lodge system. You can bring that all together for us, and I think we could even become more effective. I'm not lying, you know, and I don't laugh at that because yes,
not I, we.
Yes, that's that family structure. That's what it's based on, eh? That cultural value system that's diverse and unique, but should become an enhancement, enrichment for the sake of the growth of our children. That's our critical race theory. That's what we do. That's how we live. So just so that you know, we've been talking, me and Elijah, and we have a purpose. There's a method to this madness that we're doing. Even though we're
paradigm shift, right? We slide those 2 times, right?
Oh. 2 dimes, the paradigms. We shift them. We're going to shift them. That's it too. Good job, guys.
Again, I always try to do a little plug for our students, our community members in general that happen to be listening to this, wherever you're at. We've identified a key date, and I want to extend an invite. Actually, Tommy already is aware, but my Kona Hawk here, I want to extend an invite to you as well. Wanichoka, December 21st is winter solstice. That's a date that we have identified to do like a Ehana Wanangish buffalo hunt from Fort Peck Community College. We're going to harvest a buffalo in a culturally responsive and ethical way. We're going to have individuals like Nekshitami there to say some good words, say a prayer, and we'll go and harvest this buffalo. And we want to invite the whole campus, especially our students and their families, if they want to participate in this, because the Buffalo Chasers, that is who we are, right? And so we want to try and model something and get that experiential land-based learning, actually do what we're we're going to do and get out there and try and learn. There's a lot of things that I don't know. And so we're getting different people that have expertise in different areas of harvesting buffalo, whether that's language, butchering. None of this buffalo is going to go to a butcher. We have a facility that I'm kind of renovating right now outside of town. And we're going to go there and we're going to pay an individual to do just the hide tanning, scraping. Simultaneously, students can enter into this process anywhere they want for as long as they want. And they could learn to process the innards, kind of wash some of that tanija in a good way, make their own soup on the spot. We'll have we got a new cooler, all kinds of good stuff. And so I think it's really going to be an amazing opportunity for our students to learn every year. And I anticipate this being like an annual event for our college. It's something that the tribes has allowed us to do yearly upon request. And so one of the goals, so when I was looking at my brother Hawk's winter count, that's kind of one of the things that we had in mind, is that with this first buffalo that we harvest, we'll honor the buffalo and the elders, the ancestors, and what they used to do, and to really try and use this first buffalo hunt with our Buffalo Chasers community here to really represent what we're trying to do for this ideological paradigm shift in a good way. So I just want to let students know that. Mark your calendars, check your emails, reach out to me, Tommy, any one of us here at the college. We will either provide transportation directly, or we have funding to get you out there and back. And so we'll have meals and all that good stuff. So I just want to give a little plug for that. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up, gentlemen. Again, thank you for joining us on Petu Washte Yuhapo.
Hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ya hey